My beloved child, pause here for a moment, because what you are about to hear was not meant to pass you by unnoticed. There is movement where you once saw only silence. There is a decision forming where you once felt uncertainty. And there is something happening inside the heart of the person connected to you that is becoming too powerful for them to ignore. You may not see it with your eyes yet. You may not have received the message, the call, the explanation, or the sign you hoped would arrive. But in this unfolding story, something has shifted. Your soulmate's next step is no longer just a thought they visit in quiet moments. It is becoming a choice. It is becoming courage. It is becoming action. And the reason this moment feels so intense is because they are approaching the point where staying exactly where they are hurts more than moving toward the truth. There were moments when you wondered whether anything was changing at all. You questioned whether the connection had faded into memory, whether the silence meant indifference, whether the distance had become permanent, or whether you were the only one who still remembered the emotional weight of what once existed between you. Yet beneath everything visible, another story has been unfolding. Your soulmate has been forced to face feelings they tried to organize, postpone, explain away, and sometimes completely bury. But certain emotions do not disappear simply because someone refuses to name them. They wait. They grow quieter for a while. They hide behind routines, conversations, responsibilities, distractions, pride, and fear. Then one ordinary moment arrives, and suddenly everything that was hidden rises at once. That moment is closer than they expected. There is something they understand now that they did not understand before. They believed time would make the decision easier. Instead, time made the truth louder. They believed distance would help them think clearly. Instead, distance revealed what your presence had actually meant. They believed avoiding the next step would protect them from disappointment. But slowly they discovered that avoidance has a cost of its own. Every time they stopped themselves from speaking, something remained unfinished inside them. Every time they imagined moving forward without acknowledging you, another question followed them into the silence. Every time they convinced themselves they should leave everything untouched, their heart returned to the same place and whispered, "But what if this was never meant to remain unfinished?" That question has changed them more than you know. Your soulmate has recently begun imagining what would happen if they finally did what fear once prevented them from doing. Not what others expect. Not what pride suggests. Not what the past tells them. They have been imagining one simple, terrifying, beautiful possibility: what if they were finally honest? Honest about what they miss. Honest about what they regret. Honest about what they hoped you would understand without them ever having to say it aloud. Honest about why they pulled away, why they hesitated, why they appeared uncertain when deep inside they were feeling far more than they knew how to carry. And the more they imagine that honesty, the more impossible silence becomes. There is a difference between wanting something and becoming ready for it. Your soulmate has wanted clarity before. They have wanted closeness before. They have wanted another opportunity before. But wanting is easy when no action is required. Readiness is different. Readiness asks someone to risk being seen. It asks them to accept that the answer may not be completely within their control. It asks them to stop rehearsing and begin moving. That is the threshold they are standing near now. They are realizing that no perfect moment is coming to rescue them from vulnerability. If something meaningful is going to change, somebody must take the first real step. And in this story, they are beginning to understand that somebody may have to be them. Do not assume that this next step will look exactly the way you once imagined. That is part of what makes this moment so mysterious. You may have pictured a dramatic confession, an unexpected arrival, a long emotional message, or a sudden declaration that explains everything. But their next step may begin much more quietly. It may begin with a question. A simple message. A renewed conversation. An attempt to check whether the door is still emotionally open. They may approach carefully because their heart is carrying both hope and fear. They may appear calm while every word inside them is trembling. They may say something ordinary first because the extraordinary truth feels too large to reveal all at once. But listen carefully to what comes beneath the words. Because your soulmate is not only thinking about contacting you. They are thinking about what comes after contact. That is where the story changes. For a long time, their mind was focused on whether they should speak at all. Now another thought has begun appearing. If they speak, what are they actually willing to do differently? This is not only about saying they miss you. It is not only about admitting they still care. It is not only about reopening an emotional door and then disappearing again when things become intense. Something in them is recognizing that words without movement would only repeat the same pattern. So they are being confronted with a deeper question. If I step toward this person, am I finally willing to show up differently? That question has been keeping them awake in ways you cannot see. They remember moments you may believe they forgot. Small moments. A look. A conversation. Something you said when you thought they were not fully listening. A time when you needed reassurance and they did not know how to provide it. A time when you offered sincerity but they responded with uncertainty. A moment when they could have chosen courage but instead chose silence. These memories are returning not to punish them, but to teach them. Your soulmate is beginning to see that the connection was never difficult merely because feelings were absent. In many ways, it was difficult because feelings were present and powerful, and they did not yet have the emotional courage to meet them. Now they are beginning to develop that courage. Something happened internally when they realized you might not wait forever. This does not mean you threatened them or demanded anything. It means reality became impossible to ignore. They understood that your life continues. Your heart continues. Your future does not remain frozen because another person is uncertain. And for the first time, the possibility of losing access to the version of you that once cared so openly became real to them. That realization did not create their feelings. It exposed them. Imagine someone standing at a doorway for a long time, convincing themselves they could enter whenever they wanted. Then one day they notice the doorway slowly beginning to close. Suddenly every reason for waiting feels smaller. Every excuse loses its power. Every fear must compete with a greater fear. What if I wait too long? Your soulmate has reached a similar emotional moment. They are thinking about timing now. They are wondering whether you still feel anything. They are wondering whether you have changed. They are wondering whether someone else has begun receiving the version of you they once took for granted. They are wondering whether your silence means peace, disappointment, growth, or finality. They are trying to read an answer they cannot obtain without speaking directly to you. And this is why the next step is becoming unavoidable. But there is another layer. Your soulmate has been confronting an old pattern within themselves, something that repeatedly told them to withdraw when emotions became too real. Perhaps they called it independence. Perhaps they called it needing space. Perhaps they convinced themselves they were protecting everyone involved. Yet underneath that behavior was often something much simpler: fear of losing control. Love asks for a kind of surrender that frightens people who are accustomed to guarding themselves. Genuine connection cannot be completely managed. It cannot be calculated into certainty. It asks someone to step forward without knowing every outcome. Your soulmate struggled with that. They wanted to feel safe before being vulnerable, but vulnerability is often the very doorway through which emotional safety is built. Now they see the contradiction. And once someone sees their own pattern clearly, it becomes much harder to keep repeating it without consequence. This is why you may sense something changing even without evidence. Not because you should treat every feeling as prophecy, but because emotionally significant relationships often leave unfinished questions that both people eventually have to face in their own way. In this fictional unfolding, your soulmate is reaching that point. The excuses are becoming less convincing. The memories are becoming more honest. And the possibility of doing nothing is beginning to feel like a decision they no longer want to make. They have imagined reaching out and being rejected. They have imagined reaching out and discovering you still care. But there is a third possibility they cannot stop thinking about. They have imagined reaching out and finally having the conversation that changes everything. Not because every problem magically disappears. Not because the past becomes irrelevant. But because truth enters the room where assumptions once lived. There are words they have practiced privately. Words they have never sent. They have formed sentences and deleted them in their mind before ever touching a screen. They have thought, I should tell them what actually happened. Then fear interrupts. They think, I should explain why I went quiet. Then pride interrupts. They think, I should admit that I still think about them. Then uncertainty interrupts. But recently something different happened. Instead of asking themselves, what if I say too much? They began asking, what if I never say enough? That change matters. Because it reveals that their fear is shifting direction. Once, they feared honesty. Now they are beginning to fear regret. And regret can become a powerful teacher. They have started imagining themselves months from now, looking back at this exact season. They ask themselves whether they would be proud of remaining silent. Whether they would feel peace knowing they let uncertainty decide for them. Whether they could truly move forward while carrying a truth they never gave you the chance to hear. Their answer is becoming clear. No. They do not want this chapter to close because they were too afraid to participate in it. Something inside them is saying, do something. Not everything. Just something. Take one step. Say one honest sentence. Open one door. See what happens. And that is why the energy around their next move feels different from the endless cycle of thinking you may have experienced before. Thinking keeps someone inside themselves. A decision moves them toward reality. Your soulmate is approaching reality. But there is something even more personal they have realized about you. They understand now that what they miss is not merely attention. It is not simply companionship. It is not the comfort of knowing someone cares. They miss the way they felt when they were emotionally understood by you. They miss certain conversations. They miss the feeling that you could recognize what they were trying to hide behind ordinary words. They miss the strange familiarity between you, the moments that felt deeper than circumstances could easily explain. And perhaps most importantly, they miss the version of themselves that existed when they allowed their heart to be open around you. That realization is difficult for them because it means you became connected to something larger than attraction. You became connected to self-recognition. Around you, they saw parts of themselves they had avoided. Their tenderness. Their fear. Their desire for a deeper future. Their longing to be chosen and understood. Their need to give love without pretending not to need it in return. That kind of connection can frighten someone who has spent years hiding emotional needs behind strength. So when they stepped back, they may have thought they were escaping intensity. But they were actually escaping themselves. Now the distance has forced them to meet those same feelings without you present to soften them. That has changed everything. There is also something they have been comparing. Not necessarily another person. Not necessarily another relationship. They have been comparing emotional experiences. They have begun noticing how rare it is to feel genuinely seen. They have realized that conversations can happen without connection. Attention can happen without depth. People can be present without creating emotional safety. And when they notice that difference, their mind returns to you. Not because you were perfect. Not because the relationship was perfect. But because something mattered. And meaningful things have a way of becoming louder after superficial distractions become quiet. Your soulmate is beginning to understand what was real. That does not erase mistakes. It does not erase confusion. It does not mean you must accept anything without discernment. But it does mean the next step, if it comes, may carry more sincerity than previous attempts because it is emerging from reflection rather than impulse. They are no longer only asking, "How do I get close again?" They are asking, "How do I avoid hurting this connection the same way again?" That is a much more important question. Because reconnection without growth simply recreates old pain. Your soulmate knows this. They know you would recognize empty promises. They know you would feel the difference between temporary emotion and genuine intention. They know that if they approach you again, something must be different. So they are thinking about consistency. They are thinking about honesty. They are thinking about what they would need to explain. They are thinking about what they would need to apologize for. They are thinking about what they would need to hear from you, too. Most importantly, they are thinking about whether they are finally brave enough to remain present when the conversation becomes uncomfortable. That is the test they cannot escape. Because saying, "I miss you," is easy compared with saying, "I understand how my choices affected you." Saying, "I care," is easy compared with proving it through consistency. Saying, "I want another chance," is easy compared with creating something healthier than what existed before. Your soulmate is beginning to see the difference. And that is why their next step has taken time. It is becoming larger than a message. It is becoming an internal commitment. Something inside them has started saying, "If I do this, I need to mean it." That realization has slowed them down, but it has also made the approaching action more significant. There has been a private moment recently when they almost moved. Perhaps they reached for their phone. Perhaps they opened an old conversation. Perhaps they searched your name. Perhaps they wrote something and erased it. Perhaps they simply sat in silence and imagined your face while asking themselves what you would say if they finally told the truth. In that moment, the old fear won. But only barely. And that matters. Because fear used to win without a fight. Now courage is pushing back. They are tired of pretending that avoiding something means resolving it. They are tired of pretending that silence gives answers. They are tired of wondering how differently everything might feel if both of you simply spoke without games, assumptions, or hidden expectations. This fatigue is creating momentum. Your soulmate may not even fully recognize how close they are to action. Decisions often form quietly. A person wakes up thinking they are still confused, but deep inside, the choice has already begun. Then one tiny moment becomes the trigger. A memory. A song. A dream. A photograph. A conversation with someone. A place associated with you. A sentence they hear unexpectedly. And suddenly everything they have been resisting gathers into one clear thought. I need to talk to them. That trigger is what this story is moving toward. But before it arrives, there is something else being revealed. Your soulmate is afraid that you no longer see them the way you once did. This fear has more power over them than they admit. They wonder whether you have stopped believing in their sincerity. They wonder whether you see their silence as proof that they never cared. They wonder whether too much time has passed. They wonder whether their chance has already become a memory. These questions create hesitation, but they also create urgency. Because the longer they wait, the more uncertain the answer becomes. They know this. And they are beginning to understand that waiting for certainty may guarantee exactly what they fear. So the next step is not happening because fear disappeared. It is happening because something has finally become more important than fear. Truth. They want to know the truth. Not the version created by assumptions. Not the story they built in their mind. Not the outcome imagined through anxiety. They want to know where you really stand. They want to know whether something still exists between you. They want to know whether the door is closed, open, or simply waiting for someone courageous enough to knock. And because they cannot discover that answer from a distance, they know what must happen next. They must move. But here is where the story becomes even more intense. Their next step may include a truth you were not expecting. Something they have carried privately. Something connected to why they delayed. Something connected to what happened during the period when you believed they were emotionally absent. It is not necessarily a dark secret. It is something more human. A fear. A misunderstanding. A responsibility. A decision they almost made. A conversation they never told you about. Something that changed the way they viewed your connection. For a long time, they believed revealing it would only complicate things. Now they suspect hiding it may be the very reason nothing can move forward. So they are preparing themselves to explain. And explanation requires vulnerability. This is not the kind of conversation they can control once it begins. You may ask questions. You may express hurt. You may tell them things they were not prepared to hear. You may reveal that your heart changed during the silence. They know all of this. Yet they are considering speaking anyway. That is growth. Not certainty. Not perfection. Courage. There is a strange moment in every meaningful connection when someone realizes they can either protect their ego or protect the possibility of truth, but they cannot always protect both. Your soulmate is reaching that moment. Their ego says, wait until you know they still want you. Their heart says, you may never know unless you speak. Their fear says, what if it goes wrong? Their regret answers, what if you never try? Their pride says, make them come to you. Something deeper whispers, what if they already tried in ways you failed to recognize? That last question has affected them more than anything. Because they are revisiting the past differently now. They are noticing opportunities they missed. Signals they dismissed. Patience you gave. Moments when you were trying to create closeness while they were protecting themselves. This does not mean every problem belonged to them. Every relationship contains two stories. But they are finally examining their own part rather than focusing only on yours. And accountability is changing the energy of their next move. They do not only want to be understood. They want to understand you. That distinction may be the most important shift of all. Because before, they may have approached emotional conversations trying to defend themselves. Now they are imagining listening. Listening to what you felt. Listening to what their absence communicated. Listening to what you need if anything is going to be rebuilt. Listening even if your truth makes them uncomfortable. That is the next version of them trying to emerge. And this is why you should not judge what comes next only by the first sentence they send. Sometimes courage arrives awkwardly. Sometimes someone says, hey, while holding an entire ocean behind the word. Sometimes they ask, how are you? When what they truly mean is, have I lost my place in your heart? Sometimes they mention something small because saying, I miss you, feels too exposed. Listen beyond the surface. But also remain grounded. You are not required to chase meaning where none exists. You are not required to abandon your boundaries because someone returns. If a next step is genuine, it will eventually become clear through consistency. And that is exactly what your soulmate is beginning to understand. They know one message will not be enough. One apology will not be enough. One emotional night will not be enough. If they want something real, they must become real with you. That is the commitment forming underneath everything. The extraordinary part is that they are beginning to imagine a future beyond the conversation. They have pictured seeing you again. They have imagined hearing your voice. They have wondered what it would feel like to sit across from you with nothing hidden. They have even imagined what a different kind of relationship between you could look like, one built with more honesty and less fear. These thoughts once scared them. Now they are becoming comforting. The future no longer feels impossible. It feels frighteningly possible. And possibility changes people. Your soulmate is realizing they may not need every answer before taking the first step. They only need enough courage to create the next moment. Then another. Then another. That is how something new begins. Not with certainty. With movement. And movement is exactly what has entered this story. The silence is no longer empty. It is becoming the final space before a decision. The waiting is no longer passive. Something is forming within it. Your soulmate is standing emotionally closer to you than they have in a long time, even if nothing visible has changed yet. They are preparing. They are questioning. They are remembering. They are choosing. And somewhere inside them, one sentence has begun repeating more powerfully than all the reasons they once gave themselves to stay quiet. I cannot leave this unfinished. But there is one final thing you need to know before this part ends. The step they are considering is not the full surprise. The real surprise is what they intend to say after you respond. Because they have been holding back one specific truth, a truth connected to the exact moment they realized their feelings for you had become impossible to deny. They thought they would never tell you about that moment. They thought it was safer to keep it private. But now, as they move closer to reaching out, they have made another decision. If you open the door to the conversation, they are going to tell you what happened. They are going to tell you where they were. They are going to tell you what triggered the realization. They are going to tell you why your name suddenly became the only name they could think about. And most unexpectedly of all, they are going to tell you about the choice they made immediately afterward, the choice that has remained hidden until now. Your soulmate's next step is finally approaching. But what they reveal after that first step may change everything you thought you understood about why they stayed away. Because the moment they finally admitted the truth to themselves, they did something you never knew about, and that hidden decision is where the real story begins.